Hi, I'm going to show you how to set up your Google Classrooms for September. So you shouldn't do this before the start of the last week of the summer holidays, otherwise the students will know which classes they're in, and it's not fair for some of them to know which classes they're in and others not to. And you shouldn't be doing this after the end of the first week of the new term because the school policy is that we can't set homework unless it goes out through Google Classroom. So until your Google Classroom is set up, you can't set the students any homework. So it's a 2-week window to do this in. Your first task when you come to do this is to archive your old classes that you no longer need anymore. So you can see on the screen in front of me, I've got 3 Year 11 classes from last year, which those students are no longer going to be with me next year. So I'm just going to archive these classes. There's no delete function from here. They go into an archive, and then if you really want to, you can delete them from the archive. But it's useful to keep the classes because sometimes you might want to go and recycle a post that you used the year before, or sometimes you want to duplicate an entire class when you're producing the next year's classes. So I'm just going to archive this Year 11 class, and that will mean that it's not visible to me or the students anymore. While I can go into the archive to dig it out, the students can't. Okay, so I'm just going to get rid of my Year 11 classes. And then also I can get rid of this Year 13 class that I no longer need. And then what I've got left up here are some Year 10 classes, which are going to be my Year 11 classes next year. So I just need to change their name. So I can edit this class and just change the 10 to an 11. And again this class. And finally I can change my Year 12s into Year 13s. Okay, so that's the housekeeping for the previous year done. Now I just need to set up some classes for the new year. So I go to the plus button up here in the corner and it says create or join a class. I'm going to create. And here I need a class name and a section. Subject and room are completely optional. I usually leave those blank. However, for the class name, what you just need to be aware of is that this is an American naming system, and in America class actually means subject and section is what we would call a class. So the subject that I'm actually going to set a class up for is GCSE Physics, and the class that I'm going to set up is called 10A2/PH2 on my timetable. So this, one more time, is the name of the class. This word section means name of the class, and where it says class name, that really means subject name. What subject are you teaching these students? So I'll just press create and that'll set up the class. While it's doing that, just note that I didn't put my name on this class, and that's because although the tiles look like this to me, and it tells me the number of students in a class, when the students access Google Classroom and they have tiles with their class names on, instead of it saying the number of students, it will say my name. It'll say Mr. Billington. So there's no need for you to include your own name in the class title. Okay, so here's GCSE Physics, the name of the class. There's a class code here, which you can project onto the whiteboard if you want to. And then the students can type that code into their own Google Classroom. Remember on the plus button it said create or join a class, so they'll be able to join a class using this class code. However, I would advise against that because you will then need to constantly check to make sure all of the students have signed up, and you might miss a student, and that means that every time you set homework, that homework won't go to the student, and then you're going to get the student giving you as an excuse that they didn't do the homework because they weren't in the classroom. So my advice would be that this is a long-winded and work-heavy approach to getting the students to join your classroom. So I usually don't do that. I'll show you a different method in a minute. And up here is generate a meet link. So if I click on that, what it will do is just add a link to my classroom, and then when the students click on that link, or when I click on that link, it will open a Google Meet window so that we can have an online lesson. Personally, I don't use that link. I tend to use a nickname to open my Google Classrooms. I just use a nickname of BIL. But this is a perfectly straightforward way to do it as well, which you might prefer. You don't have to generate that link. Okay, so we're setting up the Google Classroom. So the first thing you want to do is perhaps have a look at your themes. So you can select theme there, and then you can just pick any of these banner pictures to go at the top of your classroom, and also it changes the color scheme ever so slightly. Mine's already set up with the one that I usually use for my physics classes, so I'm just going to leave that as it is. You can also upload a photo as well if you have a preferred image that you'd like to go here. However, it doesn't always appear as you think it might appear on different devices and different screen sizes. And also Google tend to put a kind of dark overlay on top of it to make it a much darker image than you were expecting it to be. So it's generally safer to just use the stock images from Google. The next thing you want to have a look at is the settings option up here. So those are the things we've already done. You can put a class description, a room and a subject in if you want, but they don't do anything and they don't show up anywhere. So I don't know if that's something that Google's intending to make use of in the future, but at the moment they don't do anything. Down here is the class code. So what I'm actually going to do with my class code is disable it because I don't want the facility, but you might want to leave it on. It's up to you. On the stream, this is an area where students can post comments and you can post comments. So what I tend to do with my year 7 to 11 classes is make it so that only teachers can comment. But for my A-level classes, I allow the students to comment as well. You'll have to play it by ear. If you trust your classes not to post inappropriate things without you checking it all the time, then you can let them post as well, but that's entirely up to you. Just be aware of the fact that parents get a weekly email summary of all of the posts that appear on all of the students' classes, and so if a student does post something inappropriate, there is the potential for a copy of that to go out to all of the parents in the class as the weekly email summary before you see that it's an inappropriate comment and disable and delete it. So again, that's entirely up to you whether you decide to trust your classes or not. Classwork on the stream. So when you post homework or any other assignments, they will go on the assignment tab, which I'll show you in a second. But it might be that you want a notification of it to appear on the stream as well. Entirely up to you whether you do that, but if you don't do that, the students won't know that you've posted an assignment unless they go looking for it. So I usually leave that as condensed notifications. If you pick the one above, that means that the entire homework post will appear on the stream and in the assignments tab, which seems a little bit of overkill to me, and it obscures any genuine announcements that you make on the stream. So I tend to leave that as condensed notifications, but again, that's entirely up to you. I don't want to see my own deleted items, so I turn that off. Guardian summaries, that's the weekly email that I just mentioned. So what I do is leave that on, and you should leave that on as well, because it allows parents to see what's... I thought I was going to get an example there, but we're not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so that's the kind of email that the parents receive, which just lets them know any assignments that the students didn't do, any assignments that are immediately upcoming, and then along this activity, this includes all the announcements from the feeds as well. So you do want to leave that switched on for the Guardian summaries. If you were setting up a Google Classroom for a lunchtime club, you would probably turn that off, because it's not necessary for parents to know that you're meeting at 12:30 tomorrow, but leave it on for your academic classes. There's the Google Meet code again, up to you whether you leave it visible to the students or not. I'm going to turn mine off because, like I said, I use a nickname to open Google Meet, but you might prefer to use that method. If you do, leave it on. I tend not to make much use of online marking And if you wished to make use of online marking, that's a much bigger video and a much bigger learning curve. So I would not worry too much about that if you're just starting out, and if you are experienced with Google Classroom already, have a good look at that yourself before you decide to change any of the settings. When you're done, remember to click the Save button at the top of the screen to make sure that everything gets saved. Okay, so the next thing that you need to do is invite some people. Now, up until this point, what we've done can be done at any time at all, but as soon as you start inviting students to your classes, like I said, this needs to be done no earlier than the last week of the summer holidays and no later than the end of the first week of term. Okay, so we're going to click on this button here to invite students. And what you now have a choice of doing is typing in student names. So I'm not going to type in any student names because of GDPR issues on this video, but when you do start to type in names here, it starts to access the Falibrium address book and will start offering you suggestions of students that you might be thinking of. And then you just need to press enter after each one, and then remember to click the invite button at the end, and it will invite them all across. Now that actually doesn't take very long to type in all their email addresses, maybe 5 minutes for a class of 30, because like I say, it's auto-suggesting after you type a couple of letters of the student's name. However, there is a quicker way which I'm going to show you now. So you need to open Ready to Learn in another tab, and you need to go to the Inquiries menu and then the selector. When you've done that, you need to pull up the class that you're thinking of. So I'm just going to pull up Year 10 and scroll down to Physics and then pick my class, and then if you scroll down to the bottom and press search, that gives you the list of the 27 students in my class. Select all. That puts them into this list over here of selected students, and now I go up to the top and click addresses, and there are all their email addresses, and I click on copy, and then I come back to Google Classroom and just press Ctrl V, and all of them get added to the list straight away. And then when I'm not going to invite them, but you press the enter key and that adds them to the list, and then all you need to do is press the invite button. Now this is not the last week of the summer holidays or the first week of term, so I'm not actually going to do that, otherwise all of the students will get invited to my classes. But if you do that, what will happen is that the list of students all appear on this list here with the word invited written next to their name, and as each of them clicks on the link that is emailed to them to accept the invitation, the invited word goes away, and so at a quick glance you can just pop onto the People tab and you can see which students have accepted the invitation and which ones haven't. And that means that in class, any of the students that still say invited next to their name, you can just remind that they need to accept your invitation. And that's an easier way to do it than cross-checking against your register, which is what you would have to do if you had entered, if you had got the students to enter codes themselves. So before I finished, I just wanted to show you one more way that you can set up your Google Classroom. So you remember that I archived some classes at the beginning of this video. Well, in actual fact, this year 11 GCSE physics class that I used all the way through the 2-year course actually contains on the classwork tab all of the assignments and all of the homeworks and all of the resources that I used with this class over the 2 years. And so in actual fact, rather than start from scratch setting up a new Year 10 class, what I would rather do is duplicate this finished class and reuse it with a new group of students this year. So what I can do instead is, in my archive, I can click on the 3 dots. You can do this for classes that you haven't archived as well, and just click on the word copy. And when you do that, it asks you to put in some names. So I'll put that in as that name and press copy. And what that's done now is place a copy of that here. It does take a little while for it to set the class up because it is duplicating all of the assignments that I originally posted to the original class. So if we just have a little look inside this class now, on the classwork tab, I've got all of the resources and all of the assignments that I used originally, but they're always drafts. So when I get to the electricity topic with this new class and I need to set them some homework to revise for their electricity test, I can click on the three dots and open up the draft of that assignment and tweak any bits that I need to, like the due date, and then I can set it, and it means that I don't have to start from scratch with this new class. So if you do already have some existing classes, it might be easier to duplicate an old class rather than set a new class up from scratch. Okay, that's it. Good luck creating your classes.